little bit too detailed. Now our business is to really invest in the deposits that these banks offer. But how they use the money, of course, we have to do due diligence to make sure, because not every bank open a title and say, oh, I'm an Islamic, you just go and invest with them. You have to look deeply how they conduct their practices. And again, alhamdulillah, now there is industry standards that we can, boom, this is not compliant with IOFI. So,
well, I have a question, and that question is related to the discussion we have here.
yeah.
Is most of the Islamic banking, the question is always arise whether you have to hold the year from this way or that way is the same. So you go either with a traditional banking or go either with Islamic banking. The profit margin both have a same.
Well,
I mean, the Islamic bank has calculated, you go and see their calculated rental values and market equity. Ultimately, you are going to pay it up, or you are going to pay to the Islamic bank is the same amount of money that you are paying to the traditional bank.
The pricing is not, again, this is, you don't judge it by how they price it. We judge it by the underlying instruments, the agreement, the terms. That's exactly. But how they price it, that's open for market competition.
Well, that's the question is for the general public. General public doesn't go under the depth of what is what. The general public goes is clear cut or the name and language is that how much you are going to pay now. So that's
correct. Of course, it has to.
No. Of course,
it has to be competitive.
You
I
cannot say the
understand.
money is not important and underlying principle is important.
Correct.
But we do not know about what is Islamic Sharia
Sure. Correct.
as a layman.
Let's inshallah. We want to finish this.
May I
the
just
fixed
make a
income.
note, please?
Yeah.
How much time do you think you need to finish the presentation? Because by 8 o'clock,
We will open the question and answer at the end.
for the sake of time and the benefit, inshallah ta'ala, I know it's a very nagging subject. Please make a mark of your questions so we can by the end, inshallah
Sure.
ta'ala.
Yeah, we'll be here even after
That's
Salah.
good, inshallah.
Just to get through the presentation.
Now we're just discussing on the deposit side. Like when you deposit, how can you benefit by depositing? What's the difference between a deposit in an Islamic bank and a deposit in a conventional bank? Because it's all start from the consumer, by the way. Okay, continue.
Okay, well, this we just wanted to show you a brief synopsis of its performance over the past year. This fund, we benchmark it against a short-term bond fund. So the yield we're expecting on it is somewhere between 3 to 5% on an annual basis. Once again, it's not guaranteed. We're not going to guarantee you it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 5%. But a reasonable prediction is between 3 to 5%. Alhamdulillah, this past year it performed really well, especially because the sukuk market really, because of the high demand for sukuk. And because it's a mutual fund, the information is available publicly online. You can go onto morningstar.com, which is kind of the research, the organization that everybody uses to research mutual funds. They have information on well over 14,000 mutual funds out there within the U.S. securities market. You can find plenty of information on there as well about both of our mutual funds. It's going slow, so just.
What is the ticker for both of them?
WISEX and AGEX. We have brochures here that have all the information on them too. If you want to come see them afterwards. Okay, so.
This is available for general public purchase, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's available through all the through any brokerage. Most brokerages, Scottrade, E-Trade, Ameritrade. Not if you're with Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley. We don't have a selling agreement with them. But all the other ones, especially the major online brokerage platforms, it's available through that. Like I said, this is just to show you all the brokerage platforms that we're available through. So on top of these investment platforms, we also do Islamic financial planning and estate planning. We've helped people set up WAQFs here in the United States. If some of you are familiar back home, WAQFs are something that have been around the Muslim community for hundreds of years. And using the trust system here in the United States, we've helped people establish this type of sadaqah jariyah really like have something that's going to outlive them and their children's children. Okay, so I'm going to give the microphone over to Bashar, and he's going to take it over from now on calculating zakat.
Just before we go into the Zakah, I just want to make one comment about when it came to the Islamic bank deposits, the difference between an Islamic bank deposits and a conventional one. In an Islamic bank deposits, the deposit is not guaranteed. In a conventional one, usually the bank borrow, when you deposit the money, they call it deposit, but actually it is lending. You lend to the bank guarantee you the principal plus a percentage and interest. Now, in a Islamic bank, the relationship is different. It's an agency relationship. In other words, you open the deposits, you hire the bank to be an agent to manage that deposits for you. So in this case, the bank doesn't guarantee you any amount, doesn't guarantee the principal, neither guarantee a fixed amount. What they will do, they will enter into a profit loss sharing arrangement. Now remember, there are, without mentioning some of these offerings here in the US, but there are a bank, for example, they offer you only profit sharing. So when you ask about, what about the loss? That's when they go silent. Because banks here in the US has to abide by the laws and regulations. And the laws clearly does not allow the bank to ask the depositor to share in the losses. So it's very difficult to bring an Islamic bank from overseas here in the US, because the moment you bring them here, they won't allow them to give that profit loss sharing arrangement. Now, in this, with the profit loss sharing arrangement, the Islamic bank will put you in a pool of funds, and they will be like, for example, 90%, 10% arrangement, 90% to the depositor, and 10%, for example, to the bank, or 85-15, etc. So what we do at Azad, when we go invest these Islamic banks, by the way, all the Islamic banks that we are investing in, they're not in the US, because unfortunately we couldn't locate any bank that will again abide with the IOFI guidelines. The guidelines very, very clear. So what we did, we went overseas. We said, okay, well, we cannot bring Islamic banks here in the US and maintain them to be an Islamic bank, correct? So what is the solution? And instead of fighting a battle with the Federal Reserve System, trying to convince them to allow us to do Islamic banks, said, forget it. We're going to go to the Islamic banks as they are, and we're going to run our analysis and our research and our due diligence on these banks, and we're going to deal with these banks. So we identified banks out of Turkey, out of Indonesia, out of Malaysia. You know, these were, we hear the stories of these Islamic banks are prospering. So that's what we did. We said, instead of bringing Islamic banks to American Muslims, we did exactly the opposite. We said, we can take you through the capital market, through the mutual fund industry, because as you know, mutual fund industry as an institutions, they can reach any capital market, whether it's in Zimbabwe or Bangladesh or South America, you name it. Like there's some of these, what they call them special banks, they call them international custodian banks. They are global banks. And they are only available to institutions, especially the mutual fund industry. So we said, oh, fantastic. If we can do this through the mutual fund industry, which is highly regulated, and if we can meet the challenge and the scrutiny of the financial market and give that opportunity for our Muslim investors in the US, we can solve most of the dilemma. So that's exactly what we did. So we start investing in Sukuk and in Islamic bank deposits and Murabaha notes, etc. And we end up with the products that we showed you. So the Azad Wise Capital Fund has been in the market for 3 years. Alhamdulillah, year 2012, the return was 6%. Imagine 6% in an environment like this. It's spectacular. Inshallah, our goal when we started is to maintain the return between 3 to 5%. And it is really compared to a short-term bond. I mean, if you go on Morningstar, you will be able to see that this fund, it's in that category, in the category of short-term bond. But if you look at the holding, and let me show you something very quickly about the holding. one of the things I want to show you in on the holding.
The first year was 2012?
No, 2010, but it was fully invested in the first year or two that we established it. It was about, the cash position was 30-40%, so it wasn't 100% invested yet. As of the beginning of 2012, it was 100% invested.
It is what I want to show you very quickly. I know we're taking time, but I thought this is really something exciting because this is, honestly, it's a very innovative idea and very innovative product that everyone is looking for. We at Zakat struggled for so many years because we could not find something halal where we can place our clients' money into it. Now, if you look at Morningstar, all this information is available to you by going to portfolio, and in the portfolio, you can just simply click on holdings to see what this fund is investing in. And you can see all these companies, all these exactly, and that's the nature of a US mutual fund. You will find all the sukuk, like for example, Islamic, Emirat Islamic banks, sukuk in Indonesia, sukuk in Malaysia, Wakala bank deposits, etc. There's almost over 35 holdings. And when I tell the people, imagine here in Detroit, you have 35 Islamic banks open in the neighborhood. Would you have the time to go and open a deposits with each bank and deposit money? And then when it comes to managing it, it would be very difficult. So the fund can give you all that options, and on top of that, we give you a liquidity, daily liquidity. So anytime you can put the money for short term, and then you can take the money anytime you want, because that's how a mutual fund is really priced. The other thing also, on Morningstar, if you go there, you can also do the performance. You can check the performance again, because this is a price daily. You can check the performance on 1 day, 1 week, year to date, 1 year. You can see the 1 year here, and you can go actually beyond that. You can see the whole the performance of the fund for the whole since inception, and you can see, for example, for the fund since inception. So you can see that all that information, and you can see, for example, 1 year, and you can compare with the category or the blue one. That's the darker blue one. So I just thought to share with you about this fund before we go to the Zakat.
So I am amazed that you were unable to find out a single company all over the United States, and you have to go
Correct, exactly.
and find out 35 companies from the other countries.
Exactly.
Which countries you are giving an example that does not have a pure Islamic model, Islamic system?
Like Turkey, for example, has one.
Complete Islamic Sharia.
Yeah, they call them participating banks, by the way. They have participating banks. You're not going to find an Islamic bank in a country by themselves. First, what they do, they create an Islamic banking law to allow, because again, Islamic banks, they work under different laws. So the problem here in the US, that the laws is all based on the Federal Reserve, on the lending. So, for example, banks will not be allowed to own tangible assets. Even if you see the bank will go into foreclosure, only exceptional, where they allow the bank to hold the title of an asset for a short period of time. How could you allow an Islamic bank to become an Islamic bank if they cannot own tangible assets? How can you allow an Islamic bank to be an Islamic bank if they will not, if you don't allow them to do a profit loss sharing, and you only restrict them to do a profit sharing? So that's what the problem. There's fundamental issues. Even the tax laws has to be also to change. So, and anyway, I don't want to go out of the scope, but just we researched this idea, we researched the concept of having a halal fixed income intensively, and unfortunately we couldn't find that much of an options here in the US. That's why we have to go overseas. We want to give our clients something genuine, and we don't want to go by, because sometimes you find some issues controversial. We don't want to go into the controversial things. We want to go with something that is adopted by a scholarly institution like AOFI. And that's exactly what the product. If you come and you look at the product, you look at what is investing in, and you kick the tire, you will find that this is something really done genuinely enough.
So it means that all the Islamic market organizations that currently exist in the United States.
As a banking, we're talking about banking, exactly. As a banking, again, I'm not here in a position, but they know, I'm sure they know they're educated people, and I know they know the challenge. They know, like, unfortunately, they tell you the laws will not allow us to do a loss sharing. So, that's what we're gonna do. Anyway,
Guidance and Islamic.
Guidance is not an investment company. Guidance is a mortgage company.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the investment on the investment side.
Okay. So what is your opinion about the?
I will share that with you after the seminar. Let me go through the Zakah, because this is a valuable information. Inshallah, I'm going to share with you very quickly about the Zakah. Again, in Azad, we always thought to create solutions for our clients. We found that the best business strategy is to come up with a solution that solves a problem. And unfortunately, Zakah, one of the confused area. And what we do at Azad, we provide an integrated service for our clients that we calculate their Zakah on their investment with us. And very quickly, I will go, inshallah, I will zoom very quickly as much as I can about the Zakah to share with you. Usually, the best way to understand Zakah is to understand the illas, the cause of issues under the fiqh. So that's where I see most of the confusion about the Zakah. So Zakah for any assets that has to be, before these assets becoming liable for Zakah, they have to meet certain requirements or certain conditions. Before we go, Zakah literally means tazkiyah, means purification and cleansing, okay? And in a Sharia language, it's a financial obligation that every Muslim, male and female, has to be on their assets given consideration to that they have a minimum amount called the nisab, and in certain assets to have a certain, that they will hold these assets for a certain period of time we call the hawl. Now, for the zakah, there are certain conditions, again, the nisab and the hawl, in certain assets, not on all the assets, fulfilling one's basic needs, and that these assets has to be completely owned by a particular person. So if the assets is not owned by a particular person, like asset of a country or a government or an asset of a waqf or a masjid, these are not owned by a particular person, no zakah on these assets. So the assets has to be owned completely by a particular person for these assets to be liable for zakah. And assets also, they have to exercise either a real growth or assumed growth. We call it numu taqdiri for these assets. So if the assets not showing the capability to grow, or growing assets will not be liable for zakah. Now, also the most important element in the assets that would be liable for zakah, that the ownership has to be complete ownership. So the ownership has to be settled and has to be vested, and it has to be accessible. The asset has to be accessible by the owner and without the interference of the others. The scholars, they define the ownership is the capability to dispose these assets without the interference of the others. And the assets has to be disposable and benefited from. All of these, the ownership, we call it al-mulkiyya tamma for the assets before they become liable for zakah.
So does that hold on 401ks then?
Inshallah, we'll come to that area, inshallah. Now let me just go very quickly about the type of assets. If you look around you, the assets that either could be an assets like monetary instruments like gold, silver, money, or could be goods, commercial goods assets, or could be cattle, minerals, treasures, etc., or crops. What we call the crops and the minerals there, we call it the things that extracted from the ground. Now, for the assets, the nisab, as we know, most of the assets, they have to have the nisab. The nisab, majority of the scholars, they agree on the gold as the nisab, and which comes to about 85 grams of gold. And if you look in today's numbers, it's about $4,432. So any person own an asset of $4,432 and above at the time of the hawl, then the whole amount will be liable for the zakah. Now, here in America, most of our assets actually, inshallah, I will come because I have to go quickly, and I will be opening the field for a question and answer, and I will be around. Inshallah, you can take your time to ask us the questions. Now, most of our assets here, Muslims in America, is actually in a different form of money and silver. I know nobody owns, very few people own farms, or they have crops or cattle. So I'm going to focus, inshallah, on the modern type of assets, and they're mainly relevant to monetary instruments equivalent to that, and also goods, commercial goods. We'll talk about it, how this would relate to ours. Now, one thing also what I found that many people get confused when they calculate the zakat is how to deal with debt. How to deal with the debt. So I'm going to talk about the debt on both sides. On the side of the borrower, the one who really issued the debt, and also on the side of the on the side of the lender who issued the debt, and also on the side of the borrower who borrowed the money or who is in debt. So on the borrower side, we'll talk about the deductibility, whether these assets or that debt can be deductible from the zakatable base. And on the lender side, we will talk whether the loan or the debt itself is zakatable or not. Now, on the lender side, scholars, they differ on whether the debt is zakatable or not. And they actually